This video is brought to you by TS4U IT Engineering Bootcamp. Are you looking for an IT bootcamp? In your journey with TS4U, you will get workshops and tasks every week, hands-on practice, technical tests and tasks, show and tell, mock interview. And we get paid fully only when you get a job. You can get affordable student loan. Become eligible for free tuition. We offer industry-demanding IT boot camps. Join now and start your IT engineering journey today with TS4U.
So start running. So I have a question about the Nginx. How does Nginx handle incoming client requests and route them to backend servers?
Okay, so as I said previously, we use Nginx as a load balancer, and we use Nginx as the reverse proxy, and we primarily we use Nginx to serve our frontends. Okay, so we have our frontends, multiple frontends, which are mostly the static web pages because they are actually created based on the React framework. Okay, so as we know, React is a static website platform, and it is a single page application framework. Okay, so what we can do is beside running it with a Node.js server, which is kind of slow, we can use a static web server like Nginx to serve the front end. So what we need to do on our end is to create an optimized version, which is to build the project and generate the build artifacts. Okay, so we do it with our CI/CD, and that CI/CD process actually builds the code, generates the build artifacts, and it actually bakes the build artifacts into an Nginx Docker image. Okay, so what happens with that is the build files actually integrates with the Nginx on this Nginx web server root folder, and we have the configurations for the Nginx which we write for ourselves, and that is pushed from the Git, and it replaces the Nginx's default configuration. So we actually have our own configurations to run the Nginx web server. So with that, we deploy the Nginx into our Docker Swarm cluster, and sometimes we deploy it with our EKS cluster based on the deployment type, okay, where we want to deploy. So it actually deploys the Nginx image, okay, and onto our cluster, and we can access our front end very easily. And this is actually very fast, like if we compare it to the Node.js servers, because Nginx can handle a lot of requests at the same time. So as of now, we actually didn't hit any bottlenecks with the Nginx. Okay, so our front end actually can run very well with the Nginx as a static website hosting, and the Nginx as the web server, that is the static file server. Okay, so and the second way we use Nginx is our front end actually makes call to the backends. Okay, so sometimes we have different servers that our backend actually is running, and for the microservice deployments that we have, those actually runs on the same Kubernetes cluster, and sometimes it runs on the same Docker Swarm cluster. Okay, if it's a dev deployment, then it runs on the Docker Swarm. If this is a production or staging deployment, it runs on the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, but all of the deployments are kind of similar in this way, that the front end needs to call to the backend. Okay, so how do our front end actually reaches to the backend? So that's where we had an issue. We used to get the CORS error, which is the cross origin request policy error. So the browser actually showed us the error, said, hey, this is a secondary domain that you are trying to access. So we always stuck at the same error because our backends weren't recognized by the browser, and the backends were private, so we didn't have any static route to go to our backends. So for fixing this issue, we actually intended to use a reverse proxy. Okay, so at first we used HA proxy in between the front end and the back end. Since this was like third party application, we needed to like use a new container to do that. But in order to simplify our deployments, what we did, we used like the capability of the reverse proxying that we already have in Nginx. So what we did with our existing Nginx configurations, we added the routes to the backend. Okay, so as we know, Nginx has the upstream and the proxy pass capabilities, so we just added those and integrated the backend routes to the front end. Okay, and then the front end application itself now can route all the backend requests to the backend pods and the backend containers that we actually want to use. Okay, and previously we also used the Nginx's load balancing capabilities as well when we actually didn't move to the AWS fully. Okay, so when I joined, I saw some legacy deployments, okay, where we had the EC2 instances, multiple EC2 instances we used to run in order to keep cost like lower. Okay, so for those environments we actually had multiple EC2 instances to run our front ends and run the backends. But in front of them, we had an Nginx server running, which were like acting like a load balancer. Okay, so we had all the upstream servers added to the Nginx's configuration, and then that configuration actually helped us to route the specific requests to the front end, and some applications were routed to the back end. So all of those were happening on that one load balancer server. Okay, so user was using this Nginx EC2 instance, okay, as a API gateway. Like we made our own API gateways. Okay, so like users were like routed to this Nginx server, which acted as the API gateway, as I said, and then they routed based on their request types and based on what their URL was and what their URI was. So based on that, they were routed to the front end servers and they were routed to the backend servers. So we pretty much used like all the Nginx's capabilities in our end.